Jill Kendall is the funny one, the rich one, the vain one, the one who drove a Maserati into a storefront, the one who showed up to an AA meeting with cocaine on her nose and then collapsed on the floor, the one who has a bar built into her closet and somehow acts surprised when she ends up drinking alone in it. She's comic relief in cashmere. She exists for large stretches of this show to make you laugh at how ridiculous someone can be when they have too much money and too little self-awareness. Except, here's the thing that the show drops on you almost in passing, in the kind of line that gets a reaction from the audience and then the scene moves on. Jill's mother chose to leave, not died, not struggled and lost, made a choice to end her life when Jill was a teenager. After years of depression and alcoholism that Jill watched up close and couldn't stop and couldn't fix and couldn't understand, and everything, every relapse, every scheme, every joke, every meltdown, every desperate attempt to become a mother herself, everything Jill Kendall does in 8 seasons of this show traces back to that one fact. So let me tell you what Mom is actually doing with Jill Kendall, because it's a lot darker than it looks. Let's start with what Jill's life looked like before we meet her. She grew up wealthy. North Carolina, money. The kind of upbringing that looks perfect from the outside. She moved to California to be with her husband James. She worked hard to shed her Southern accent, deliberately, consciously, because Jill has always understood that the way you present yourself is the armor you wear, and underneath all of it, for her entire life, she was carrying the thing nobody in her world talked about: her mother's illness, her mother's drinking, and then her mother's decision to leave. When we first meet Jill in season 2, she walks into an AA meeting and says what happened to her like she's reading from a list: DUI. A moment where she almost didn't make it through. Husband left her. She says it flatly. No tears, no drama. Just facts delivered with the practiced composure of someone who learned very early that falling apart in public is not an option. That flatness is the tell. That's not someone who has processed what happened to her. That's someone who has gotten very, very good at skipping over it. Here's what I think Jill's addiction is actually about. Her mother was an alcoholic. Her mother struggled with depression. Her mother made the choice to leave when Jill was a teenager, which means Jill spent some portion of her childhood watching her mother disappear. Not all at once, but slowly, in the way addiction takes people, and then she was gone. When you watch a parent struggle with addiction and lose, 2 things can happen. You can decide you'll never touch it, or you can find yourself, years later, in exactly the same place. Not because you wanted to, but because the thing that destroyed your parent was the same thing that briefly made the pain bearable when you tried it yourself. Jill tried it, and it worked for a while, and then it didn't. And then she was sitting in an AA meeting in California, divorced, alone, with a DUI and a moment where she almost didn't make it through herself, and the same disease that took her mother. That is not a punchline. That is a person who survived something terrible, picked up the exact tool that made it worse, and almost didn't come out the other side. The show plays it for laughs, a lot, and sometimes it is funny, but the spine underneath it is devastating if you know where to look. Now here's the part that I think is the emotional center of Jill's entire arc. In season 4, on the 20th anniversary of the day her mother left, Jill has a breakdown. Christy and Bonnie rush to her, and in the middle of all of it, Jill makes a decision. She wants a baby. Think about what's happening in that moment. 20 years since her mother left. 20 years of carrying the fact that she didn't stay. And on that anniversary, the thing Jill decides she needs is to become a mother herself. That's not random. That's someone trying to rewrite the story. If she can become a mother, a present, loving, stable one, then maybe the thing that started with her mother doesn't have to end with her. Maybe she can be the version of the woman her mother couldn't be. Maybe she can give someone the thing she never got. And here is where the show does something genuinely cruel. in the way that good storytelling is sometimes genuinely cruel. Jill gets pregnant and then she loses the baby at 57 days. She has an app on her phone that counts. In a later scene, her phone pings quietly and she looks at it. Today would have been day 57, she says, almost to herself. And then she moves on. That detail, the app, the counting, the specific number, is one of the most quietly devastating things in the entire show, because it tells you that Jill, who performs not caring about most things, has been counting every single day since she found out she was pregnant. She has been holding on to it privately, carefully, in the way she holds on to everything that matters to her. Not showing it, just counting. After the miscarriage, Jill decides to foster a child instead. And the reason she gives is the one that gets me every time. She says she was listening to Bonnie talk about being bounced around foster homes as a kid, and she decided the best thing she could do was give one of them a good home. Jill Kendall, who grew up with everything, who has never lived in anything less than 12,000 square feet, heard Bonnie describe a childhood of being passed between strangers and thought, I can fix that for someone. I can be the person who stays. Because Jill knows, better than almost anyone, what it costs when the person who is supposed to stay doesn't. She gets a foster daughter named Emily, a teenager, not the baby she pictured, and she is awkward with her and tries too hard and wears a baseball cap with a crown on it and asks Emily if she wants to try on bras and is generally a complete disaster at the normal parts of parenting. But she shows up, she stays, she is trying in the way that Jill always tries, loudly, imperfectly, with too much money thrown at the problem, but genuinely. And then Christy helps Emily's biological mother get sober, and Emily goes back to her. Jill loses the child she was finally letting herself love, and she doesn't fall apart publicly. She just goes quiet. And then she eats, and eats, and eats, because Jill Kendall, who has managed appearances her entire life, who built her identity around looking perfect and being put together, falls completely apart the moment the one thing she actually wanted is taken away. The weight gain, and the show does make jokes about it, which is uncomfortable on rewatch, is the only time in 8 seasons where Jill's inside and outside match, where the pain is visible on her body because she can't keep it somewhere else anymore. And then she goes to a health spa for months, and she comes back looking exactly like she did before. The outside gets fixed, the inside stays exactly where it was. Then comes season 7, the final door. Jill goes to a fertility clinic to freeze her eggs. She is doing everything right. She has a partner, Andy. She has money. She has finally built something that looks like stability. She is ready to try again. The doctor calls. There are no viable eggs. That's it. The biological option is gone. The thing she has been trying to get to since the 20th anniversary of the day her mother left. The chance to be the mother she never had, to give someone the childhood she deserved, to rewrite the story. The door closes, and Jill, who has been holding herself together through relapses and a miscarriage and losing Emily and years of trying, becomes clingy and paranoid and eventually drives Andy away, because that's what Jill does when the pain gets too big for the armor. She doesn't fall apart quietly. She holds on too tight. She needs too much. She becomes, for a moment, exactly the thing she is most afraid of. Someone whose need drives the people around her away. Just like her mother's illness drove people away. Just like it drove Jill away, eventually, in the only direction available to a teenager who couldn't fix it. Here's what I think the show never quite says directly about Jill. She is the character who has the least obvious reason to be in that AA meeting. She's rich. She's beautiful. She had opportunities and resources that nobody else in that group had. And on the surface, her problems look like the problems of someone who had too much too easily and didn't know how to handle it. But Jill Kendall watched her mother struggle with depression and addiction and then make the choice to leave as a teenager. and she never had anyone sit with her in that grief. She didn't have a group, she didn't have a sponsor. She had money, and a performance of being fine, and the same substance her mother used, which briefly made the unbearable bearable until she almost didn't make it through herself. There's a moment in the series finale where all the women are comparing their backgrounds, and Jill says, very simply, "Mine chose to leave." And then the conversation moves on, because that's what always happens with Jill. She says the most devastating thing in the room, and then the room, and moves forward, and nobody stops to look at it directly. That's Jill's whole life. The most devastating thing in the room, and everyone moves on. The show gives Jill the ending she spent 8 seasons trying to build. She gets pregnant again, naturally, after being told it wasn't possible. She marries Andy. The thing she thought she'd lost forever arrives when she finally stopped white-knuckling it. It's a happy ending, and it is genuinely earned. But I keep thinking about the 20-year-old app on her phone, the one counting days toward a baby she lost. I keep thinking about Emily, somewhere in Los Angeles with her biological mother, and whether Jill thinks about her. I keep thinking about a teenager in North Carolina who watched her mother disappear and had nobody to tell her what to do with that. Jill got her happy ending. She deserved it, but she had to survive an enormous amount of quiet devastation to get there. And the show mostly played that devastation for laughs, because Jill was always performing not being hurt, and the show usually took her at her word. So maybe Jill Kendall isn't the character Mom takes seriously first. She is absolutely the easiest one to dismiss, but she is the one who has been through the most and shown it the least. She is the woman who built a life out of looking like nothing could touch her, because the one thing that touched her most profoundly happened when she was too young to protect herself from it. Her mother left, and Jill spent 30 years trying to become the person who stays. She finally made it. If this video made you think about Jill differently, subscribe and give it a thumbs up. And let me know in the comments, did you see the tragedy underneath the comedy? Or did Jill have you fooled the whole time?